There is a kind of pain that almost no one takes seriously. It is the pain of being in a relationship, sharing routines, conversations, and silences, and still feeling a constant emptiness inside. This feeling doesn't appear all at once. It forms slowly. At first, it's just a strange discomfort, hard to explain. The person is there, replies to messages, shares life with you, but never really reaches who you truly are. Over time, that discomfort becomes emotional weight, and that weight turns into emptiness. The most confusing part is that, on the outside, everything seems normal. There are no major fights, no physical abandonment, no obvious reason to leave. But inside, you feel that something essential is missing. Emotional presence is missing. Genuine connection is missing. Feeling seen, heard, and understood is missing. Many people ignore this emptiness because they were taught that love requires sacrifice. That feeling bad is normal. That every relationship is like this. Slowly, they start doubting themselves. They think they are asking too much, being too sensitive, or expecting something unrealistic. But emotional emptiness does not come from asking too much. It comes from absence. Absence of listening. Absence of genuine interest. Absence of emotional exchange. You start realizing that you speak, but you are not truly heard. That you express yourself, but you are not welcomed. That you feel deeply, but you must hide it to avoid being a burden. And in this process, something dangerous happens. You begin to adapt too much. You shrink your emotions, filter your words, and control your feelings. And the more you reduce yourself to fit into the relationship, the emptier you become. This emptiness does not mean you don't love. Very often it means the opposite. It means you are giving yourself in a space where emotional reciprocity does not exist, where your needs are constantly postponed, minimized, or ignored. Being with someone should not make you feel alone. Being in a relationship should not create inner silence, constant anguish, or the feeling of emotional abandonment. If you feel empty beside someone, this is not a flaw in you. It is a signal. And signals exist to be heard, not ignored. In the next part, we will talk about how this emptiness begins to appear in your behavior, your thoughts, and the way you start seeing yourself within the relationship. Emotional emptiness does not stay confined to an internal feeling. Over time, it begins to shape your behavior, your thoughts, and even the way you see yourself within the relationship. At first, you try to compensate. You put in more effort to please, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict. You believe that if you do enough, if you love enough, the connection will finally appear, but it doesn't. And then you start adjusting yourself. You begin to think twice before expressing what you feel. You choose silence over honesty. You avoid important conversations to prevent distance. And without realizing it, you start distancing yourself from who you are. This is one of the quietest effects of emotional emptiness. It makes you abandon parts of yourself to preserve the relationship. You start questioning whether your feelings are exaggerated, whether your needs are valid, whether your sensitivity is a flaw. And when that happens, the relationship stops being a place of support and becomes a place of constant emotional self-monitoring. Another clear sign is the change in your inner state. You feel tired without an obvious reason. Your emotional energy decreases. Small interactions create frustration. Moments that should bring comfort only bring more confusion. You notice that you are always waiting for something from the other person, but that something never comes. Emptiness also shows up in how you perceive yourself. Your self-esteem begins to fluctuate. You feel the need to prove your worth, justify your emotions, and earn attention. Slowly, the relationship stops being an exchange and turns into a constant search for validation. And the most painful part, you start normalizing it. You tell yourself that this is just how relationships are, that loving means shrinking yourself. That feeling incomplete is part of the process. But it is not. When a relationship makes you feel small, invisible, or emotionally disposable, something is deeply misaligned. Love should never require you to disappear so someone else can feel comfortable. Emotional emptiness doesn't just hurt. It erodes. It erodes your spontaneity. It erodes your emotional safety. It erodes your ability to trust your own feelings. And the longer you remain in this state, the harder it becomes to recognize where you end and where the relationship begins. You no longer know if you are sad because of the relationship, or if sadness has become part of who you are. In the next part, we will talk about why this type of emptiness is so difficult to identify, and why many people live this way for years without realizing the emotional damage it causes. One of the most dangerous aspects of emotional emptiness in a relationship is that it rarely presents itself clearly. There is no exact moment when you realize something is wrong. There is no specific event that marks the beginning of this feeling. Emptiness settles in silently, disguised as routine, adaptation, and normality. Many people associate emotional suffering only with constant fights, betrayal, or physical abandonment. When none of these are present, they conclude that the relationship is healthy. However, emotional emptiness does not scream. It whispers. It shows up in the lack of interest in deep conversations, in the absence of curiosity about how you feel, in indifference toward your pain and achievements. Another factor that makes this emptiness difficult to identify is the fear of facing reality. Admitting that you feel empty next to someone you love is deeply uncomfortable. It means questioning your choices, expectations, and even the idea of love you have built. Because of this, many people prefer to adapt to discomfort rather than confront the possibility that something essential is missing. There is also the constant hope that things will change. You believe it is just a phase, that the other person is going through a hard time, that connection will grow stronger with time. This hope, while understandable, often prolongs suffering. It makes you tolerate emotional absence longer than you should. Emptiness is also confused with emotional exhaustion. You think you are just overwhelmed, stressed, or overly sensitive. You start looking for external explanations for a discomfort that actually comes from the lack of real emotional bonding. And the more you rationalize, the further you move away from your intuition. There is also an important social element. Many people stay in empty relationships because, from the outside, everything looks fine. The couple functions, the routine exists, the structure is in place. Questioning this creates guilt, fear of judgment, and a sense of ingratitude. After all, it's not that bad. But the problem with emotional emptiness is not how much it hurts on a given day. It is the cumulative effect. It is living for months or years feeling that something is missing, without being able to clearly name what it is. It is the slow erosion of joy, enthusiasm, and the sense of belonging. Identifying this emptiness requires courage to look inward and recognize that love should not be only physical presence, commitment, or habit. Love needs emotional connection. It needs exchange, interest, and genuine care. In the next part, we will talk about the difference between being in a stable relationship and being in an emotionally empty one, and why this confusion keeps so many people trapped in bonds that drain them. One of the biggest emotional traps in relationships is confusing stability with connection. Many people stay in emotionally empty relationships because everything seems organized, predictable, and functional. There is routine, commitment, and continuity. But none of that guarantees emotional bonding. Stability refers to structure. Connection refers to feeling. A relationship can be stable and still be deeply cold inside. When there is only stability, the relationship works like a silent agreement. Each person fulfills their role, avoids major conflicts, and maintains an appearance of normality. However, there is no emotional curiosity, no genuine interest in the other person's inner world. Conversations become superficial, repetitive, and functional. In this kind of dynamic, you may feel practically safe, but emotionally malnourished. Depth is missing. Exchange is missing. The feeling that someone truly cares about what you feel, think, and experience is missing. The problem is that stability creates a false sense of security. It makes you believe that because the relationship is not chaotic, it must be healthy. But emotional health is not just the absence of conflict. It is the presence of care, listening, and reciprocity. Many people resist acknowledging this emptiness because they fear losing what has been built. Years of shared history, common plans, family ties, and routines. All of this carries weight, and under that weight, emotional emptiness seems like an acceptable price to pay. But living on stability alone is like living in a house without warmth. It protects you from the rain, but it does not keep you warm. You survive, but you do not feel alive. Another important point is that when there is no connection, you begin to feel alone even when accompanied. You realize that you cannot fully be yourself, that you need to filter emotions, lower expectations, and settle for little. And slowly, this adaptation turns into resignation. Emotional connection requires vulnerability. It requires real interest. It requires the willingness to see the other beyond the roles they play in the relationship. When this does not exist, the relationship may last, but it leaves silent scars. Recognizing that stability is not enough does not mean devaluing what was lived. It simply means accepting that you deserve more than a relationship that only functions. You deserve a relationship that connects, supports, and emotionally strengthens you. In the next part, we will talk about how the fear of being alone keeps many people stuck in stable yet empty relationships, and why this fear often becomes stronger than the emotional pain itself. The fear of being alone is one of the strongest forces that keeps people stuck in emotionally empty relationships. This fear is rarely conscious. It shows up as justifications, rationalizations, and comparisons. You tell yourself that it could be worse, that many people are in harder situations, that at least you are not alone. For many, loneliness is not just the absence of someone. It is associated with failure, rejection, and the feeling of not being enough. That is why the idea of ending or questioning an empty relationship feels more threatening than staying in it. Emotional emptiness becomes familiar, predictable, almost comfortable. Loneliness, on the other hand, feels like unknown and frightening territory. Many people prefer dealing with the daily discomfort of emotional abandonment rather than facing the silence of being alone. They believe that physical presence is better than complete absence. But presence without connection comes at a high cost. It prevents true connection with yourself. When you stay in a relationship just to avoid being alone, you begin negotiating your inner boundaries. You accept less attention, less care, and less reciprocity. And each concession reinforces the idea that your needs are not that important. The fear of loneliness also distorts reality. You start overvaluing small gestures, treating emotional crumbs as major proofs of love. Any minimal sign of interest becomes hope for change, and that hope keeps you stuck, even when nothing essential changes. There is also the fear of starting over. Starting over requires emotional energy, courage, and the willingness to face uncertainty. Staying in emptiness, as painful as it is, feels less demanding. And so time passes. Months turn into years, and the emptiness deepens. It is important to understand that loneliness is not the opposite of love. The opposite of love is the absence of connection. Being alone may hurt at first, but being emotionally alone inside a relationship slowly erodes your self-esteem and identity. Recognizing that fear of loneliness is guiding your choices is a crucial step toward breaking this cycle. Not to make impulsive decisions, but to stop deceiving yourself. You deserve companionship, not just presence. You deserve bonding, not just habit. In the next part, we will talk about how this emptiness directly affects your self-esteem and why, over time, you may start believing you deserve less than you truly do. Emotional emptiness does not stay only in the realm of feelings. Over time, it begins to directly affect the way you see yourself. Self-esteem does not disappear all at once. It erodes in small, almost invisible layers, until you start feeling less confident, less secure, and less worthy. When your emotions are not welcomed, you begin to question their value. If what you feel finds no space, no listening, and no validation, the silent conclusion that forms is that maybe the problem is you. Maybe you are too intense, too sensitive, too demanding. And this internal narrative slowly grows stronger. You start measuring your worth by the other person's response, by the attention you receive, the interest shown, the care offered. When this comes in small amounts, your self-esteem drops. When it comes in almost nothing, you begin to believe that this is all you deserve, and the relationship becomes a distorted mirror where you see yourself shrinking. Emptiness also creates constant insecurity. You feel the need to work harder to keep the bond, to avoid abandonment, to avoid being replaced. This creates anxiety, self-censorship, and fear of expressing needs. After all, if you ask for too much, you might lose even the little you have. Another deep impact occurs on your emotional identity. You adapt so much to the other person that you lose clarity about who you are. Your desires become confused. Your wants feel less important. Your boundaries become too flexible. And eventually, you no longer know whether you are being quiet out of maturity or out of fear. Healthy self-esteem is built through emotional reciprocity, through feeling accepted, valued, and respected. When this is missing, emptiness does not just hurt, it teaches you to settle for less. It normalizes absence. It makes you call survival love. Over time, this process creates a silent emotional dependence. You begin to cling to the little you receive because you believe you could not get anything better. And this belief is one of the cruelest consequences of prolonged emotional emptiness. It is important to say this clearly. No relationship should make you doubt your worth. No love story should require you to shrink in order to stay. If this is happening, it is not proof of love. It is a sign of emotional wear. In the next part, we will talk about the difference between loving someone and being emotionally dependent, and how this confusion keeps many people stuck in relationships that drain them. One of the most common confusions in emotionally empty relationships is believing that staying, even while suffering, is a sign of love. Many people confuse intensity with depth, attachment with connection, and dependence with devotion. This confusion keeps cycles of suffering disguised as commitment. Loving someone should not require you to give up yourself. When love is healthy, it expands you. When it is dependence, it restricts you. Emotional dependence forms when you begin needing the other person to feel whole, validated, or secure. Your emotions, your mood, and even your self-esteem start depending on the other person's responses. When they pull away, you feel empty. When they come closer, you feel relief. This constant fluctuation creates an unbalanced dynamic. In healthy love, there is choice. In dependence, there is fear. Fear of losing. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. Another clear sign of emotional dependence is the inability to imagine your life without the person, even when the relationship causes pain. You know you are hurting, but you cannot see yourself outside that dynamic. Leaving feels more painful than staying. And that is not love. It is attachment to what is familiar. Dependence also makes you tolerate behaviors that violate your boundaries. Lack of attention, emotional indifference, devaluation. All of this is rationalized in the name of love. You believe loving means enduring. That insisting is proof of feeling. That giving until you are empty is virtue. But love is not constant self-sacrifice. Love does not require you to live in a state of emotional hunger. Love should never make you feel insufficient. When real love exists, there is exchange, mutual care, space for vulnerability on both sides. You can be who you are without fearing loss. In dependence, you shape yourself to be accepted. In love, you are welcomed. Emotional dependence strengthens when inner emptiness already exists. The person starts occupying the place of something missing within you, and that is why losing them feels unbearable. But no relationship should carry the responsibility of completing someone. Recognizing the difference between love and dependence does not mean loving less. It means loving more consciously. It means stopping the confusion between pain and depth, absence and destiny. In the next part, we will talk about the clear signs that emotional emptiness has gone too far and is seriously affecting your emotional and mental health. There comes a point when emotional emptiness stops being just an internal discomfort and starts directly affecting your emotional and mental health. At this stage, the body and mind begin reacting more intensely, sending clear signals that something is wrong. You may start feeling anxiety without an obvious reason, a constant restlessness, a tight chest, a permanent sense of alert. Small situations within the relationship trigger disproportionate reactions because your emotional system is already overloaded. Emptiness creates tension, and tension turns into anxiety. Another common sign is emotional exhaustion. You feel tired even without physical effort. Simple conversations feel heavy. Interactions that were once natural now require too much energy. This happens because you are constantly emotionally regulating yourself, trying not to feel too much, not to ask for too much, not to be too much. Emptiness can also show up as persistent sadness, not intense or dramatic sadness, but a constant state of discouragement, apathy, and lack of enthusiasm. Things that once brought joy lose meaning. You feel disconnected not only from the relationship but from life itself. Over time, physical symptoms appear. Frequent headaches, muscle tension, sleep problems, appetite changes. The body reacts to what the mind tries to ignore. The emotional silence lived inside the relationship finds a physical outlet. Another significant impact is isolation. Even while in a relationship, you feel alone and start withdrawing from friends, family, and social activities. Sometimes due to lack of emotional energy. Other times because you cannot explain what is happening. Emptiness creates confusion, and confusion creates distance. At this point, many people begin thinking the problem is them. They believe they are depressed, weak, or emotionally broken. But in reality, they are responding to an emotional environment that does not offer safety, care, or reciprocity. Living too long in an emotionally empty relationship places your emotional system in survival mode. You stop living to protect yourself. And living in constant protection mode is deeply exhausting. Recognizing that emptiness is affecting your health is not weakness. It is awareness. It is the moment when your body and mind ask for change, care, and truth. In the next part, we will talk about what can be done once you recognize this emptiness, and what the first steps are to leave this state without impulsive decisions, but with emotional clarity. Recognizing that there is emotional emptiness in a relationship is one of the hardest steps in this entire process. Not because clarity is lacking, but because fear is overwhelming. Fear of what this awareness might demand from you. Fear of difficult conversations. Fear of change. Fear of losing something that, even while hurting, still feels familiar. The first essential point is understanding that recognizing emptiness does not force you into immediate decisions. It is not about leaving impulsively, nor about enduring everything in silence. It is about stopping self-deception, about naming what you feel without minimizing, justifying, or blaming yourself. The second step is honestly observing the relationship's dynamics, not what you hope it could be, but what it truly is. Is there space for emotional dialogue? When you express yourself, is there listening or only defensiveness and indifference? Is there genuine interest in understanding you or only in keeping things the same? Many people try to fix emptiness by giving more, loving more, explaining themselves more. But emotional emptiness cannot be filled with one-sided effort. When only one person sustains the emotional bond, exhaustion is inevitable. Another important point is reconnecting with yourself. Emptiness often deepens because you have been disconnected from your own needs for too long. Returning to interests, friendships, habits, and personal space is not selfish. It is emotional recovery. It is also essential to observe how the other person reacts when you begin setting boundaries. Relationships with emotional growth potential respond with openness, even if imperfectly. Emotionally stagnant relationships respond with invalidation, sarcasm, or silence. Seeking external support is part of this process as well. Talking to someone you trust or seeking professional help helps organize thoughts and emotions. Emptiness creates confusion, and clarity rarely emerges in isolation. Finally, remember that recognizing emptiness is not failure. It is emotional maturity. It is realizing that love should not be a place of constant inner absence, and that you deserve relationships where you can exist fully, not merely survive emotionally. In the next and final part, we will talk about closing this cycle, whether through consciously rebuilding the relationship or having the courage to walk away from what no longer nourishes you. A necessary closure for everything discussed so far. Reaching this point already says a lot about you. Recognizing emptiness, understanding its causes, and seeing its impacts requires emotional honesty. Now, the final step is not an immediate decision, but a conscious choice. Staying to rebuild, or having the courage to close a cycle that no longer nourishes who you are. Rebuilding an emotionally empty relationship is only possible when there is openness from both sides. Love, intention, or shared history alone are not enough. Real emotional commitment is required. That means willingness to listen, review behaviors, take responsibility, and create new emotional agreements. Rebuilding is not returning to what it was, but creating something different from what failed. But it must be said clearly, not every relationship can or should be rebuilt. When only one side carries the responsibility for change, emptiness remains. When your feelings are constantly invalidated, ignored, or minimized, insisting is not love, it is self-erasure. Having the courage to leave does not mean you failed. It means you chose self-respect. Many people stay in empty relationships because they believe leaving is giving up. But giving up on yourself is staying where you cannot exist fully. Ending an emotional cycle is painful because it involves grief. Grief for what was lived, for what could have been, and for the expectations created. But this grief also opens space for something essential: reconnecting with yourself. When emptiness comes from the relationship, distance can be the first step toward feeling again. There is emotional life after emptiness. There is love that does not require you to shrink. There is connection that does not drain, but strengthens. But none of this is possible while you remain tied to a relationship that only occupies space without nourishing you. The final question is not whether you love this person. It is whether you can be yourself next to them. Healthy relationships do not leave you in inner silence. They do not make you doubt your worth. They do not teach you to settle for less. They welcome you, listen to you, and strengthen you. If someone is by your side but you feel empty, maybe love is not missing. Maybe connection is. And where there is no connection, staying costs too much. This video is not an invitation to impulsive rupture. It is an invitation to truth, to emotional awareness, to choosing relationships where you do not have to disappear to be loved.